Hi, I'm Oliver and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. So I did classic prog right at the start of the channel, way back in July, August last year, and I promised that I would do a modern prog follow-up, and today I haven't actually got round to doing one. Oops. Apologies for those of you patiently waiting for it, but here is my 5 albums to get you into modern prog. These videos always seem to need to come with some sort of disclaimer before I start jumping into the albums I want to talk about. It's quite funny really, but the reason I do it is because some of these genre labels are problematic, the lines are blurred, and I want to explain why I've made these choices and why I may have omitted certain albums that you might expect to be in this video. So, what is modern prog? Different people have very different ideas. Some people will class any band with standard rock instrumentation that is progressing the sound forward, they would class that as modern prog, but I think we're working with too broad parameters to actually come up with any kind of tangible list with that. I mean, some people would call Radiohead prog, for example. Not me. We also have bands of the 80s and 90s, bands such as Marillion, IQ, and Frost more recently, and those bands are creating something really that can be categorized as neo-prog. They really like their emotive elements, they often fuse funk and the poppier components with the classic prog. It has a very specific sound, and that's why I would rather categorize those albums as neo-prog and something different to modern prog. Also, a record like Astra's The Weirding, whilst a great record, it's a throwback classic prog album and it seems fairly pointless to include it on this list. So to stop my incessant rambling, because I'm going to go on forever otherwise, modern prog to me is music that takes stylistic traits from classic prog, such as the grandiose concepts, impressive technical playing, all of that, but it has a contemporary feel to it in some way. It has a contemporary edge to it, but not to the point that it becomes unrecognizable as prog. For example, Battles Mirrored, fantastic record, and there are very progressive elements about the music. It's experimental, but I wouldn't class that as modern prog. Having said that, one record in this list could be considered prog metal, but I think that there's a real blurring of genres there with modern prog. There's a lot of progressive rock bands that have metal elements to them as well. I don't think that means that they can only be called progressive metal, but they're also modern prog too. So hopefully I've got a nice diverse mixture of records in this list for you. Weirdly, every album here is also a concept album, and not that every prog album, modern prog album, has to have a concept behind it. It just it ended up working out that way as I picked my albums. Phew. Okay, time to talk about some records, I think. Number 1, Steven Wilson, The Raven That Refused to Sing and Other Stories, released in 2013. I had to start this list with something from Steven Wilson. He's an incredibly important figure in modern progressive rock music. Aside from his fantastic spate of solo records, one of which we will return to in a second, he also fronted the project Porcupine Tree, and it's a band that went from the sound of classic prog to more alternative rock to progressive metal. There's so many fantastic records to delve into in Porcupine Tree's discography, so I'd suggest you checking them out if you haven't already. Also, as a producer, Wilson has proven his commitment to keeping the dream of prog alive. I mean, aside from producing some of Opeth's albums, he's worked with bands like Marillion and Anathema. He's also been remixing and remastering classic prog records from bands like King Crimson, Jethro Tull, Caravan, and Gentle Giant. Busy, busy guy. So, The Raven That Refused to Sing and Other Stories is a rich, complex record. It definitely has a 70s prog influence, but it also has a very contemporary feel. It's an urgent record that's always moving forward. Loose concept record here. Steven's third solo record frames each song around ghost stories and supernatural occurrences, and that sort of frames the 54 minutes of genius on display here. Opening track Luminol begins with punchy bass and this driving drum groove courtesy of bassist Nick Beggs and drummer Marco Miniman. The expansive guitars fly into the scape and build this breathtaking section before veering off into this fantastic mini moog solo, and every instrument just sort of brims and pulsates around it. This is what I mean about a record always moving forward. The section explosively ends and sort of collapses into a delightful proggy landscape where you have reverb-heavy guitar chords ringing out. You have this marching snare drum back in the mix, and then you have Theo Travis's flighty flute parts that just meld with that mellotron sound. Eventually, the track triumphantly returns to the first section, which sort of rounds off this circadian journey. But this is only the first track. This track feels like standing on the edge of a cliff and letting the wind whip across your face. There's something really liberating about it. The Watchmaker is probably my favourite track here. It's a story of a stoic watchmaker who one day just goes mad and kills his wife, but one day his wife returns as a ghost. A twisting prog rock masterpiece beginning with these lilting guitar harmonies and narrated by Wilson's gentle yet commanding vocal presence. I think Wilson's voice is an often unmentioned facet of his talents. It very directly suits the music that he produces and writes. It's an unfussy delivery and style that doesn't take away from the instrumentation. It just coalesces very beautifully, and it really suits this style of loose storytelling as well. Wonderful album, it really is. This is where you should start if you want to get into modern prog. Number 2, Kevin Gilbert, The Shaming of the True, released in 2000. Oh man, what a record. A meta-concept album about the dark side of fame and the music industry. Oh, and also, it's a bona fide masterpiece. Sadly, Kevin Gilbert, an incredibly talented musician and songwriter, died in 1996 from autoerotic asphyxiation, otherwise known as the asphyxie wank. This record was released posthumously in 2000 with the help of Nick DiVirgilio, who was the drummer of Spock's Beard, a band we shall return to in a bit. And it cannot be stressed how important Nick was in the inception and release of this record. He painstakingly sat in the studio and went through all of the notes that Kevin had made, unfinished takes and ideas, a very rough track list that had been scrawled on a piece of paper, and he took all those things to construct this expansive record. He recorded new instrumental parts, new vocal parts to beef up the sound and make it the album that he believed Kevin wanted it to be. So, The Shaming of the True is a progressive rock record, but it could also be labelled as a rock opera in the vein of The Who's Tommy or something. It starts right at the beginning with Johnny Virgil, who's the titular character of the rock opera, who's this talented young guy who gets spotted by a talent scout or by a producer, gets signed a record contract, he gets sucked into the dark side and the seduction of fame, and he eventually becomes a burnt-out shell of his former self. Gilbert had a dark sense of humour and an expressibility to be able to distill the shitty parts of the industry that he was so entrenched in. And as a result, this album has a really sharp satirical edge to it. It has a tongue-in-cheek awareness that stops the rock opera slant from feeling cheesy, I suppose. Certifiable #1 Smash's lyrics reveal this. It's got tattoos, it's got a pierced hood, it's got Generation X, it's got lesbians and vitriol and sadomasochistic latex sex, it's got Mighty Morphin Power Brokers and Tanya Harding nude, macrobiotic, lacto-vegan, non-confrontational, free-range food. It's got the handshake, peace talk, non-aggression pact, and multicultural integration of segregated historical facts. This guy was funny as hell. The track itself is a brilliant piece of music instrumentally. It's a riffed-up opener that surges forward, and the end of each bar is a pushed beat, which just propels the track forward. The production on this track and on this record in general is pitch perfect. Nick DiVirgilio and mixer masterer John Cuniberti just provide such it's a sound that's got so much clarity to it. For example, on this track, the bass has got this thick sound to it, and then these vigorous drums and guitar lines. It feels like it's the best way of representing the songwriting, the fantastic songwriting that's on display throughout this record. Suit Fugue is actually written as a fugue, and lyrically it's all of these industry professionals trying to get hold of Johnny, getting him to sign contracts, getting him into meetings. It's a fantastic showcase of Kevin's abilities as a songwriter. For those of you that aren't aware, a fugue is a style of compositional technique that involves taking a melody, introducing it to different parts, creating this weaving complex texture. It's also known as contrapuntal or counterpoint, meaning that these melody lines maintain their own independent movement. Final track, Johnny's Last Song, has Johnny standing homeless on the street in the pouring rain, listening to one of his own hits on someone's radio far off in the distance. The guitar ballad dissipates into this heavy, dissonant synth chord that wallows and eats up the entire atmosphere before stopping dead. The only thing left is the fading out of the rain pattering on rooftops. It's a really dark way to end an album that in a way has so much joy to it, but it does have a dark side, and this sort of real final ending, it has so much finality to it, and it's a really atmospheric way to end this journey that we've taken with this character, Johnny Virgil. Go and listen. Unfortunately not on Spotify, so it's not on my playlist that I always do. You'll have to seek this out elsewhere. Number 3, Spock's Beard, Snow, released in 2002. Now onto the longest record of today's list, also not on streaming services. It was certainly not on Spotify anyway, so that means my playlist this month will only be 3 albums long, unfortunately, but you'll be able to find this record, you just need to seek it out. Spock's Beard's Snow, hard words to put together, is 114 minutes long. It's a huge prog rock double album that does not let up. It doesn't, it just doesn't. It's fantastic. Spock's Beard formed back in 1992 in LA. In LA? Why did I say it like that? With drummer Nick DiVirgilio, guy that worked on Kevin Gilbert's record, I was just talking about him. We've got John Ballard on bass, and then brothers Neil and Alan Morse on vocals, and then keyboards and guitars respectively. Snow, released in 2002, is the 6th Spock's Beard record. We have Dave Meros now on bass duties, and also the very important addition of Ryo Okamoto, who is on all keys. And when I say all keys, I mean all keys. We have the Mellotron, Hammond organ, Jupiter 8, Mini Moog, vocoder. This guy's doing a lot on this record, and it's very important to this album's sound as well. I picked Snow today because I think it's the most ambitious but also the most successful Spock's Beard record in terms of vision. These guys really achieve what they set out to do over an almost 2-hour running time. First off, Alan Moore's guitar parts, ranging from lush acoustic strumming to stomping crunch distortion, are a big part of why this album works so well for me instrumentally, especially the way in which it interacts with Okamoto's dexterous keyboard parts. It's just stellar. Take, for example, the switch up between stomping rock and the jazz Hammond organ section at the end of Welcome to NYC. It flows so well. Of course, the band like to keep things varied, and they do so on this record, and I think that's wise because it is almost 2 hours long and people might be likely to get bored unless you're one of those people that are inclined to listen to 2-hour magnum opus records like Swan's recent albums. It's very difficult for me to pick a track to talk about since we have a finite amount of time and there are 26 of them to choose from. But I really want to highlight the track Devil's Got My Throat off of the first disc. This thing flies like shit off of a shovel. It's this galloping rock track that has intricate runoffs, and Neil Morse really goes for it with his vocals. A really great track. Ryo gets to showcase his talents with his gorgeous keyboard solo, eventually allowing Alan to do the same with his guitar. It's just so much joy to this track. It just proves how much fun you can have with progressive rock music, and just reminds people that progressive rock is not all the pretentious waffle that a lot of people claim it to be. The 1-2 punch of All Is Vanity and I'm Dying is a brilliant showcase of the band's technical ability. It's a joy to hear a band bounce off of each other with so much vigor. A great album. It's a very long album, but it's a fantastic album, and I think you should definitely check it out. Number 4, the Mars Volta with Francis the Mute, released in 2005. Ooh. The Mars Volta, a creation of songwriter and guitarist Omar Rodriguez Lopez and vocalist Cedric Bixlar Zavala, names that I apparently hilariously pronounce. Thank you so much, Melvin. They formed in 2001 after the split up of their previous band, At the Drive-In. Their debut, Deloused in the Comatorium, is a great record. It definitely has more of a post-hardcore bent, kind of left over from the At the Drive-In's final record, Relationship of Command. It was their final record till they decided to release that shitty new album in May. Their follow-up record, however, 2005's Francis the Mute, is a sprawling, messy prog masterpiece, twisting between the blistering guitar solos, glitching pedals, lachrymose horns, psychedelic noise, and the glorious backline talent of bassist Juan Alderete and drummer John Theodore. The concept of this record is loosely based on a diary found by late audio engineer Jeremy Ward, who worked on Mars Volta releases early on, as well as At the Drive-In's In Casino Out, and also a number of the De Facto records. The diary spoke of an adopted person attempting to find their biological parents, and the names that pop up throughout the record are the names that were being pointed towards in the original diary. The unique sonic identity of this album largely comes from its Latin influence. It gives this big album such a vibrant flavour. You can really clearly hear it on the third track, El Via El Vaquez. I can't say Spanish words. Larry Harlow's syncopated piano chords that he stabs out, they just make me want to dance. Come on, let's do it, let's dance. Nah. It's this fusing of Latin and progressive hard rock that works so well. The opening and then the second section is led by these two fiery solos from guest player John Frusciante on guitar. And it just ignites this section of the record after the relatively simplistic ballad that is The Widow. Omar and co really like to craft an atmosphere, and on Francis the Mute they build long sections in between these heavily constructed instrumental moments. For example, the tape loops and electronic sounds that follow the conventional section of The Widow actually go on for longer than the conventional section itself. Or the croaking frogs at the beginning of Miranda, This Ghost Ain't Holy Anymore, that lasts around 4 minutes. It really takes its time in building up this energy that's going to be unleashed eventually in the next part of the record. These sections allow the density of the instrumentation to breathe, and it makes for such a rewarding listen start to finish. Opening track Cygnus, Visman Cygnus is fantastic, but I have to end talking about this record with the 32-minute finale, Cassandra Gemini. What a track. This is what Omar himself has to say about it. Ever since I was a teenager and had various listening experiences with the likes of King Crimson, John Coltrane, and Miles Davis's Bitches Brew, I've always wanted to do something like Cassandra. Something deformed and out of control, something enormous and violent, a whole album fitted into one composition, something ruthless that no one can remain careless to. 5 separate sections: Tarantism, Plant a Nail in the Navel Stream, Famine Pulse, multiple spouse wounds, and sarcophagi make up this monumental piece of music. Really, the success of this track is the building to these momentous choruses. I mean, the chorus in Plant a Nail in the Navel Stream is just, it's unbelievable. Reprisals of earlier moments in the record, confluent textures of trumpet, synths, the standard rock instrumentation, Cedric's combusting vocals. A modern classic, undoubtedly. Get stuck in. Number 5, Haken, Aquarius, released in 2010. Yes, okay, I suppose this album could be considered a prog metal album in many ways, but it's also one of my favourite modern prog records of the last 10 years, so I had to include it. And there are many elements that are also modern prog rock, not just prog metal. So sharpen your knives if you so wish. Haken are a band that formed in London in 2007, releasing their debut record Aquarius in 2010. There's a reason I've held back the word epic until this point in the video. Hold on a sec, did I use the word epic earlier? Well, Haken aimed for and hit the mark of epic on this 72-minute saga about a mermaid who's discovered by a fisherman and sold to the circus. But she's the only person capable of saving the whole human race from an impending flood, dying in the process. Yes. Eclectic is probably the best word to describe this record. It's a diverse range of styles and sections that perfectly suit the strange and fantastical lyrical concept. Opening track, The Point of No Return, flips from these grandiose harp arpeggios to woodwind-filled circus music, which is a foreshadowing of the mermaid's capture, to the circus in the track Aquarium, to these heavy guitar riffs. This diverse pool of styles is really the only way to present such a strange conceptual tale, and I'm aware that on paper it might sound a bit difficult to get through and a little bit hokey and a bit gimmicky, but honestly this is a fantastic project. You just, once you've heard me talk about it, because I don't want you to turn off this video yet, once you've finished listening to me talk about it, go and listen to it and I think you'll understand hopefully what I'm trying to get at here. Ross Henning's vocals are on point throughout this record as the soaring prog vocalist, but also as a narrator of this story. He even resorts to death growls on the track Streams, and it's a brave decision to make, but it really suits that section of the track. Now, he really is a great vocalist. I actually saw Haken in London in 2012 on their Visions tour, and Ross, well, aside from the band being one of the tightest I've ever seen live, Ross's vocals are just as good live as they are on this record. Boy, can he sing. Third track, Aquarium, is a treasure trove of magnificence. It has this imposing, rising chorus that just knocks me flat every time I hear it. The opening track of this album is very symphonic and emotive, and I think it's testament to the band's vision and confidence that they pull it off, especially when you consider that the concept is about a mermaid that saves the world. The track Sun repeats this trick. It's symphonic and it's passionate, and it gears up the listener for that finale. That finale being Celestial Elixir, a 17-minute track that is about as grand as it gets, and it switches up from the intro of barraging riffs to woodwind and harp, to even to a spiky funk section with smatterings of organ. The epicenter of this track, however, is the slow build to this chorus, which ekes out every last drop of emotion from the narrative, and it's everyone thanking this creature for sacrificing herself to save everybody. She may never return, but I can wait forever. If we can't make amends, I'll chase your rainbow till the end. And the final lyric of the track is, love is running through our veins. A beautiful, rousing end to this record, and it's proof of the power that prog has to create emotion out of something that's pretty hokey, pretty strange, mermaids and all these strange concepts. It can reveal emotion through that, and I think that's important to remember. It's a strong attribute that prog has as a genre. Brilliant album. Right, and that's my 5 albums to get you into modern prog. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please comment down below on your thoughts of the content. Do you like the albums that I picked? Did you not? Which other prog records would you recommend to other people? I've done a playlist as always, but the Spotify playlist for the 5 albums is only 3 because 2 aren't available on Spotify. But I've also done more albums to get you into modern prog, so there's more stuff for you to check out as a follow-up listen. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.